All right, let's welcome in our watchdog on Wall Street, Chris Markowski, and PwC partner Mitch Rochelle to comment on that and other things. Gentlemen, Betsy McCoy's concern about Biden. I'll start with you, Mitch. What do you think?
I think you have to focus on what's going to be important to voters in November. Just look at today's from 8:30 this morning, the jobless claims, 4.4 million. That's 26 million people in the last 5 weeks. That could be an unemployment rate somewhere between 15 and 20%, as you said at the top of the hour, Bob. I think that's going to be the real issue. Who's going to take us through a recovery? What the economy looks like. Think about the famous quote, "It's the economy, stupid." I think that's going to be the issue on voters' minds in November. And I think whatever candidate and whatever team can convince the voters that they can take them through it, that's going to be the one that people are going to rely upon.
Chris, let's go ahead and bring you in. What are your thoughts?
I think what they're doing to Joe Biden, quite frankly, is cruel. I've had family members that been affected with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we've seen Joe Biden in these interviews, and it's obvious that to people even conducting the interview that he's just not there, and they're trying to prop him up to some degree. I think they definitely need to put somebody else in there to replace him. We see what happens to presidents. I mean, they age in dog years. You take a look at Obama when he first came into office and when he left office, or George W. Bush, or even Donald Trump. He's not a spring chicken, and this is not going to be an easy job, especially navigating through this. So I would strongly suggest they try to find somebody else to take his place.
Okay. Let me move on to some other topics, including what's going on with the budget and how much money we're spending on trying to keep the economy going. Mitch, is this effective money? For instance, the PPP program that's supposed to go to small businesses, there are a lot of listed companies, publicly held companies that are taking that money.
Yeah, I think that'll sort out. The thing that concerns me, Bob, though, is not the big companies, it's the really small ones.
Right. The
Paycheck Protection Program, which is intended to help businesses 500 employees or less. So that's 30 million small businesses. But in there, 1/3 of them, or 10 million of those small businesses, are actually sole proprietorships or folks who are self-employed. They weren't able to file an application until roughly the 10th of April. So many of them were shut out, and that's still 10 million people. So I think it's really important to sort of focus on the bottom up. I think the media is focusing on some of the exceptions, and I understand why. Yeah. But I think it's really important that this program get funded, get the House to vote, get the president to sign it. So all of these vital to our economy businesses can continue to pay their employees, or the self-employed can pay themselves.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the PPP and who gets the money?
I think that at some point in time, there's got to be a come to Jesus moment. I don't think they can print enough money to keep the economy afloat. You're right. All of these independent contractors, all these small businesses, they're not going to get the money. We were actively trying to help people out to get this, and they were given every excuse in the entire world why they couldn't. And some of the excuses were just absolutely absurd. We're seeing today some of the numbers, in particular in New York City and Long Island, and the amount of people that have antibodies, and the number is pretty high. So at some point in time, we're going to have to, bring out that scale and weigh this. I mean, how far are we going to go? How many people are going to be out of work? How many businesses are we going to let fail before we decide we're going to start having to open things up?
Yeah, 21% in New York City with antibodies from random testing. That's what the estimates are, Chris, as you mentioned. Chris and Mitch, thank you. Talk to you in a little bit. All right, let's welcome back President of Markowski Investments, Chris Markowski, and PwC partner Mitch Rochelle to comment on what's going on. I assume that you guys are for opening up businesses and taking the right steps and all that. I wanted to talk to you for a second about what Mitch McConnell suggested, which was that states should be open to declaring bankruptcy instead of taking money from the federal government. And let me tell you the problem that I think some people might have with that. And that is, when the state would do that, they would look for places to save money. And among the places they would start looking are pension funds for people like police officers and firefighters and teachers and that sort of thing. That doesn't get as much attention. But how do you respond to that, even though we all know that debt's getting out of control, but is that the way you go about handling it? Mitch, I'll ask you first.
Okay. Yeah. One of the challenges, Bob, is with the way our government structure is set up in this country is there's obviously federal government and then it goes down to state and local government. And whenever the federal government starts cutting back on spending, it often shifts that burden to state and local. Well, right now, the state and local government is in a revenue squeeze because if people aren't earning, and we have a close to 20% unemployment rate, people aren't earning, businesses aren't paying taxes, people aren't paying taxes. They have a real revenue squeeze right at the time when their costs are going up. So it is a tremendous burden. The question is, where does that burden fall? If it falls on the federal government, it ultimately falls on the taxpayers. So this is something that is our collective challenge to solve. And the only way to really solve it is to start getting businesses back to work so they can start earning revenue and start generating tax income again for municipalities and states.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the idea of states declaring bankruptcy?
It's obviously going to have an issue in regards to bond debt. And listen, you're looking at a situation where you've got states that haven't done a very good job of managing their money over the years, that have become very, very bloated in regards to staffing. I grew up in Albany, New York. Every other building up there is a state office building, for crying out loud. Don't tell me that they can't cut staff. They can. And I've also spent a lot of time taking a look at some of these government pensions, places that are not doing well, like Illinois. That was a disaster before the coronavirus. New Jersey, a disaster before. New York, underfunded pensions for a long period of time, where you struck deals with government workers that you couldn't really handle and they didn't contribute enough. Where's the money going to go? If the federal government starts putting money in, you want to give it to hospitals that are down and out, or maybe help the schools because school tax revenue might be down there. But it always ends up going into these black holes and we never see where it's going to come out.
Yeah. Well, it is a tough one because as a reminder, they were told to shut down, so a lot of these states have less revenue. It's all because of the virus. So that's what's unfortunate. But there are some bloated areas. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Chris and Mitch,